Today on Weekend Dialogue, we have a very special person who is a very important official when it comes to managing Sri Lanka's economy. It is none other than Dr. P.B. Jayasundara, the Secretary to the Ministry of Finance and Planning. Dr. Jayasundara, it's a pleasure to have you with us in our program.
Okay.
Doctor, the budget deficit seems to be a bit of a bother. Also, the IMF showed their concern a few days back on this. And 2009 budget deficit, according to the latest statistics by the Ministry of Finance, shows us that it runs up to a massive 9% or 470 billion rupees. Your view on this?
Yeah, 2009 again was an exceptional year, not only for Sri Lanka, for the entire global economic environment. No country in 2009 has shown a lower deficit than what those countries have enjoyed. Even the advanced countries today are speaking over 10% budget deficit. Sri Lanka was not exemption. Even India, which recently presented its 2010 budget, revised their budget deficit to 7.9% from 5% which they earlier predicted. So it's a global phenomenon. But in the case of Sri Lanka, deficit is due to three specific reasons which IMF itself examined. One is the revenue forecast could not realize, largely because of the lag in the recovery of the international trade, because our trade based taxes have performed very badly. Some of the imports have stagnated or declined, and as a result those sources have not generated revenue. So 0.5% of GDP has lost because of the contraction in the revenue base, entirely because of the delay in the recovery process, which even the IMF could not predict quite clearly. Second reason is the public investment, which has reached 6% of GDP over the last 3-4 years because of the heavy infrastructure development undertaken by the government, continued. No government can interrupt, in the interest of fiscal consolidation, the public investment program, which is progressing quite well in many key strategic sectors, and public investment has gone up to 6.6% of GDP, partly because the disbursement of foreign aid was very high, and as a result the required counterpart funds are also high. So public investment is a positive thing, though it has contributed to deficit. Combined with the lower revenue and high public investment necessitate extra domestic borrowing, and that has produced also high interest, which is also about 0.8% of GDP because of the high interest rate regime prevailed, and also additional borrowing. People should also not forget the year that we have gone through is also a turnaround. From the positive side, the war ended. From the negative side, the government had to manage 300,000 refugees who basically displaced through the entire operations, and the government had to spend on a priority basis. Those were not done with foreign aid or anything. Government has to embark on a relief, rehabilitation and resettlement program, demining activities, and as a result some of those expenditure also remain high. But overall we have seen 9.7 budget deficit, but once again it is likely to drop back to 7.5% based on the current revenue trend, and also the expenditure government has built into the current fiscal policy regime. And that 7.5% deficit is basically recovery centric, because the economic recovery moving back to 6.5% will enhance our revenue base. With 3.5% average growth which we have seen in 2009 relate to 9.7 budget deficit. Now the economy is coming back to over 6% growth with the expanded revenue growth, and interest rate regime has come to a fairly low level or stable level, and the public investment remain at this level. We are optimistic that our budget deficit could be contained at 7.5%, which the International Monetary Fund itself felt justifiable.
Another very important component is the foreign investments. Now, we didn't see any substantial foreign investments or FDIs coming into the country after the war as expected. If you take the stock market, even though it was performance very well, the net foreign outflow from May to date is about 7.4 billion rupees. Is the government working towards improving this situation?
No, government is looking for an overall favorable investment climate, but the government cannot work in isolation of the global condition. Global economic recovery is still fragile. I mean, if you see, the global economy has recovered and the East Asian economies are doing reasonably well, but the foreign investment has not occurred in the direction that one expected. Anyway, even India foreign direct investment is very slow. You saw the recent Indian budget, you know, the debate going on with regard to some of the uncertainties around the Indian economy itself as well as the global environment. Soon after the presidential election, you don't expect any investment other than the stock market, but the stock market outlook remains positive, and the foreign direct investment and the private investment will occur over time, and I think the bigger turnaround will occur in the with the 2010 budget, and investment, by looking at the investment inquiries now taking place from both foreigners as well as from the domestic sources, we are optimistic the investment in real economy will take place towards 2010 onwards.
How is the preparations for the upcoming budget, which is going to be a challenging one?
Well, upcoming 2010 budget, the basic policy framework is already in place. The presidential election manifesto, which is Mahinda Chintana Vision for a Future, has spelled out a medium-term economic policy scenario. The objective is basically to place Sri Lanka on a $4,000 per capita income country. Now we have to travel from the current $2,000 per capita income to $4,000 per capita income status over the next 4 to 5 years. So that is the overall direction. Now, of course, managing a middle income country in a current global economic environment is a challenge. But because many negatives which Sri Lanka had gone through are no longer relevant, like the 30-year-old conflict, the global economic downturn which 2008-2009 all of us had to go through, then various political uncertainties, the stable political regime emerging are very much conducive for a much stronger growth rate. Sri Lanka, even with the war and the volatile global environment, has shown near 6% growth. So with the recovery and many factors becoming favorable, and more importantly much needed infrastructure now nearing completion, nobody is predicting a power crisis for the next 5 to 10 years. Nobody is looking at under capacity port facilities. In fact, we are expanding our port capacity far beyond what the next 3-4 years need. In fact, it is for next 50 years. So investors are looking at these long-term outlooks, long-term opportunities, and the road network, irrigation systems, the port and aviation facilities will, together with the unique environment the country's tourism is beginning to witness, will definitely help us to look at the budget more positively. From the public expenditure side, we are basically governed by the much more committed funds, long-term funds available from our bilateral and multilateral donor sources, and it is on that basis public investment has been planned. The recurrent expenditure, most of the pressures which we had from the war period are no longer there. So it is basically rationalization of some of the public expenditure which we have. The commitment of the government is known. The